darkness ruled the void. Not the gentle kind found on lonely nights above a quiet world, but the raw, suffocating absence that stretched between galaxies, cold, indifferent, and eternal. The galactic core glittered in the distance, its light muted as though the stars themselves feared what was about to happen. The high throne of the Galactic Empire had spoken. Humanity had refused to kneel. What should have been a simple diplomatic compliance had spiraled into something unthinkable. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire was preparing for a confrontation that might actually cost them blood. Fleet Lord Kael'vor stood in the observation deck of the Imperial Spear, his 4 eyes watching the formation of the armada outside the viewport. 2,000 warships, dreadnoughts, cruisers, carriers, arrayed themselves into a formation so vast it cast a shadow across the light of the nearest star. A show of force. An object lesson. A warning to anyone foolish enough to defy imperial decree. And yet, Kael'vor could not shake the strange, creeping unease in his gut. "Status," he growled, his voice a guttural rumble that made the bridge crew flinch. "Formation is complete, my lord," replied his adjutant. "We are ready to jump to the Sol sector. The humans will have no time to respond." Kael'vor turned away from the viewport, his cloak swaying behind him like a curtain of night. "No time," he repeated. "That's what we said about the Drakkar. And the Drakkar burned an entire quadrant before we forced them into extinction. Humanity is different." The adjutant hesitated. "My lord, they are primitive. Barely spacefaring. Their fleet numbers in mere hundreds, if the intelligence reports are accurate." Kael'vor's mandibles flexed. Primitive or not, the humans had dared to refuse tribute. They had dared to dismantle Imperial listening posts. They had dared to strike down an Imperial patrol in their outer system, and they had done it without hesitation. And worse, they had sent no apology. Instead, they sent a message with nothing but a laugh. A laugh. The sound still echoed in Kael'vor's memory. It was not the sound of fear. Not the sound of desperation. It was the sound of something he could not name, something that made the Empire's admirals shift uncomfortably in their seats. No one had ever laughed at the Empire. And survived. The jump was made in silence. Space folded, the stars blurred, and then Sol. Humanity's cradle lay before them. A yellow star, its planets circling dutifully, the third one glimmering with the faint blue haze of oceans. But it was not Earth that greeted them. It was the fleet. Kael'vor's eyes narrowed. The humans had assembled their armada just beyond the orbit of Mars. Hundreds of ships, yes, but not the kind of ships Kael'vor expected. They were angular, brutal-looking things, forged not for elegance but for war. No diplomatic vessels, no retreating colony barges. They were waiting. And they were not afraid. A voice crackled over the comms, a human voice, calm, steady, with the kind of confidence that made Kael'vor's claws tighten on the armrest. "Galactic Empire. This is Admiral Reese of the United Terran Fleet. You've come a long way to die." The bridge fell silent. "Admiral Reese," Kael'vor said, his voice measured. "You stand before the might of the Empire. Lay down your arms, surrender your systems, and your people may live." For a long moment, there was no reply. Then came the laugh. Deep, rolling, contagious, carried across every open frequency, echoing in every ship of the Imperial Armada. The crew shifted uncomfortably. Some hissed in confusion. Others bared their fangs. Kael'vor stood frozen, claws digging into the console. Admiral Reese spoke again, his tone light, almost amused. "You still think this is going to be a war? You poor bastards." And then the human fleet began to move. Kael'vor had seen battle before. He had seen fleets clash across burning skies, seen planets scoured to ash, seen enemies fight to their last dying breath. But he had never seen anything like this. The human ships moved as if guided by a single will. There was no hesitation, no fear, no chaotic scramble. The formation was tight, surgical, designed not just to defend but to kill. "Scan them," Kael'vor barked. "I want to know what we're dealing with." The sensor officer's frills flared in alarm. "My lord, their energy signatures are inconsistent. Some of these readings are impossible. Their largest ship is..." The rest of the sentence died as the Titan emerged. It was a warship unlike anything Kael'vor had ever seen, larger than an Imperial dreadnought, bristling with weapons, its hull dark and scarred, like a predator bearing old battle marks. The bridge went silent. Even the stars seemed to pause. Kael'vor felt it then, something he had not felt in centuries. Dread. These humans were not merely defiant. They were ready. And as the human fleet advanced, Kael'vor understood the truth that had eluded the Empire until this very moment. Humanity wasn't laughing because they were arrogant. They were laughing because they had been waiting for this. The order came without hesitation. "Open fire." The void erupted. Thousands of Imperial warships unleashed their fury in a single, synchronized volley. Plasma lances tore through the dark, heavy torpedoes screamed toward their targets, and entire sections of space lit up like a newborn sun. For any other civilization, it would have been the end. But not for humanity. Admiral Reese stood on the command deck of the TNS Titan, hands clasped behind his back as the storm of fire closed in. His crew did not panic. They moved like a single living organism, executing commands before they were spoken. "Brace?" his XO asked, a trace of humor in her tone. Reese smiled faintly. "Brace? No. Return fire." The Titan's hull shimmered as its shields absorbed the first wave. The Imperial barrage broke across it like rain against a mountain. The ship barely shuddered. Then the humans answered. Kael'vor watched in disbelief as the human fleet lit up. Beams of coherent light, railgun slugs traveling at fractions of light speed, and missiles so fast they blurred past Imperial sensors. The humans had fired a counter-volley with surgical precision, not random retaliation, but deliberate, calculated destruction. Imperial dreadnoughts began to vanish from the tactical display. What weapons are these?" shouted the sensor officer. Kael'vor's claws dug into the console. "Track them. Adapt shields." "It doesn't matter," the officer cried. "They're punching through, my lord, they're aiming for reactors." Kael'vor's mandibles locked tight. These were not weapons of intimidation. These were weapons of extinction. Out beyond Mars, the battle became chaos. Human destroyers weaved between Imperial cruisers, striking surgically at weak points before vanishing into the void again. Frigates darted forward in packs, disabling carrier bays before the Empire's bombers could even launch. And the Titan. The Titan was not a warship. It was a force of nature. Its main cannon fired once, and an Imperial battleship simply ceased to exist. Its hull atomized into glowing fragments, debris scattering across space like confetti. Kael'vor felt his throat go dry. That was no ordinary weapon. That was a planet killer, mounted on a single ship. And it had just been fired with casual precision. "Report." Kael'vor roared, but the bridge was chaos now, officers shouting, alarms wailing, damage reports flooding in. The Empire had deployed 2,000 ships. In the first 7 minutes, they had already lost 73. And the humans hadn't even begun to fight in earnest. Admiral Reese's voice came across the open channel again, calm and maddeningly amused. "Empire, I'd suggest you call this off before you lose the rest of your fleet." Kael'vor snarled. "Do you mock us? We are the Empire. We have ruled for 10 millennia. Reese chuckled. "Yeah, I've read your history. Funny thing about empires, they all think they're eternal, right up until the day they aren't. The comm cut, and Reese turned back to his crew. "Time to push," he said. "Bring in the hounds." Kael'vor barely had time to ask what he meant before they appeared, new signatures, dozens of them, jumping in behind the Imperial formation. They were smaller ships, sleek, black, almost invisible to sensors, strike craft, but unlike anything the Empire had faced. Human stealth destroyers. And they were already firing. Imperial cruisers exploded from within as their reactors went critical, precision strikes from inside their own defensive perimeter. Entire wings of ships were cut off and annihilated before Kael'vor could even order a retreat. He felt it then, not just fear, but the realization that this wasn't just a battle. This was a demonstration. Humanity was showing the Empire what happened to those who thought themselves untouchable. Across the galaxy, news feeds were already ablaze. Pirate broadcasters, black market relay stations, even civilian networks were capturing fragments of the battle and transmitting them outward. Billions were watching. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy was seeing the Imperial Armada lose. Whispers spread like wildfire across alien worlds. The unthinkable was happening. The Empire was being beaten. And the humans were laughing. Kael'vor stood frozen, staring at the tactical display as half his fleet burned. He had underestimated them. The entire Empire had underestimated them. This was not some fledgling race stumbling into the stars. This was a species that had learned to survive by fighting monsters, by enduring extinction-level events, by killing anything that tried to end them. And now that monster had been pointed directly at the Empire. "Pull back," Kael'vor ordered at last, his voice low, almost hoarse. The bridge crew turned to stare at him in shock. "My lord? Retreat?" Kael'vor bared his fangs. "Pull back. Regroup on the edge of the system. We are not ready for this fight." The order was relayed, but it was too late for many of them. The human fleet pressed forward, relentless, merciless, carving through the Imperial lines as though the Armada were made of paper. And through it all, the laughter continued. By the time the remnants of the Imperial Armada limped to the system's edge, they had lost over a quarter of their ships. It was a humiliation unlike anything in Imperial history. Kael'vor stood on the darkened bridge, his reflection staring back at him from the viewport, his hands still clenched into claws. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. The Empire could not allow a single battle, no matter how disastrous, to shatter 10,000 years of fear-driven rule. But deep down, Kael'vor knew something had changed. The galaxy had seen weakness. And humanity had shown strength. And now, every eye in the stars would be watching what the Empire did next. Kael'vor had never felt so hollow. The jump back to Imperial space had been silent, the surviving officers avoiding his gaze, their morale burned away like the wreckage left behind in Sol. But retreat was not the end. It was preparation. Within days, the Empire had mobilized everything. Every sector fleet, every reserve shipyard, every vassal state militia pressed into service. Never before had such an armada been assembled, not even in the war that forged the Empire's dominion. This time, Kael'vor would not simply force humanity to surrender. He would break them. The second invasion of Sol was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. 5,000 ships. World-killer dreadnoughts. Planetary siege platforms. Kael'vor stood on the command deck, a towering figure silhouetted against the stars, and spoke into the fleet-wide comms. "This is the end of human defiance. We will show the galaxy what becomes of those who laugh at the Empire." His crew roared in unison, the battle cry echoing through every ship. The Armada leapt. What they found was not an unprepared Sol system, nor a human fleet caught off guard. What they found was something the galaxy would speak of for the next 1,000 years. Humanity had been busy. The Titan was no longer alone. When the Imperial Armada emerged from FTL, dozens of ships the size of the Titan hung in orbit around Jupiter, silent and waiting. Super carriers. Planet-killer battleships. Mobile fortresses armed with weapons that should have taken 100 years to build. But humans had built them in months. And they were smiling. Admiral Reese's face appeared on every Imperial comm screen, calm and almost pitying. You brought the whole Empire with you, huh? Good. Saves us the trouble of hunting you down one system at a time. Kael'vor snarled. This is your last chance. Surrender your fleets, or Earth will burn. Reese's smile didn't fade. Kael'vor, we know how to burn. We were forged in fire. You think you can scare us with death? That's adorable. The channel cut. And then the stars ignited. The second battle of Sol was not a battle. It was a storm. The human fleet advanced in perfect unison, moving with terrifying precision. Entire wings of Imperial ships were shredded before they could even raise shields. Human carriers launched swarms of drones, each one a guided missile with its own AI brain, weaving through defenses, striking at engines, reactors, weapon mounts. Kael'vor watched as his dreadnought escorts were cut apart in minutes. The humans were no longer just defending their homeworld, they were dismantling the armada piece by piece. The galaxy was watching too. Across 10,000 worlds, every major news network was streaming the battle in real time. Billions of civilians watched Imperial ships die, one after another, as humanity drove the most powerful fleet in history into retreat. The myth of Imperial invincibility was burning. Kael'vor refused to yield. Bring the siege platforms forward, he barked. Target Earth directly. If they want to die defending their home, let them choke on its ashes. The platforms began charging, their weapons capable of burning continents from orbit. But before they could fire, space itself seemed to open behind them. A second human fleet emerged, fresh reinforcements from beyond Sol. They had flanked the armada. Kael'vor's blood ran cold. How do they have this many ships? His adjutant's frills trembled. My lord, the other powers, the neutral worlds, they are joining the humans. Reports are flooding in. The Alliance of Free Systems has declared open rebellion. The Valari, the Keshri, half the Rim sector is rising up. Kael'vor felt the truth crash over him like a tidal wave. This wasn't a war against humanity anymore. This was the beginning of the end of the Empire. The final blow came when the Titan itself cut through the center of the Imperial formation, its main cannon charging. Kael'vor locked eyes with the viewscreen as Admiral Reese's face appeared one last time. You should have left us alone. The Titan fired. A column of light brighter than a sun tore through the Imperial flagship and the fleet command relay behind it. Every ship slave to Kael'vor's command lost formation in an instant, falling into chaos. It was over. When the wreckage finally stopped burning, less than a third of the Imperial armada survived. They fled Sol in complete disarray, abandoning their siege platforms, abandoning their dead, abandoning any pretense of victory. Kael'vor stood on the deck of a crippled cruiser, staring at the ruined fleet around him. He had not just lost a battle. He had lost the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, systems across the Empire declared independence. Uprisings spread like wildfire. The myth of imperial rule, maintained for 10,000 years through fear, was shattered forever. And everywhere, the sound spread like a contagion. Laughter. Human laughter. Not mocking, not cruel, but unstoppable, like a sound carried on the wind of history itself. Admiral Reese stood on the deck of the Titan, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport as the fleet returned home. Think they'll come back? His XO asked quietly. Reese smiled faintly. Maybe. But next time, they won't find us waiting. They'll find us coming for them. The stars stretched before them, endless and full of possibility. Humanity had been confronted. Humanity had laughed. And the galaxy would never be the same again.